If you came to episode 3 of A Knight of the Seven Kingdoms expecting dragons, battles, an earth-shattering spectacle, you might have been surprised. This episode doesn't shout for your attention. It doesn't beg you to watch. It quietly, confidently earns it. There's a bravery to this kind of storytelling that feels rare these days. Instead of chasing shock value or constant escalation, it leans into something far more challenging: intimacy. To people, a handful of conversations, a few songs drifting through the air, and the weight of everything left unsaid hanging between sentences. And somehow, that restraint makes every single moment hit harder. What stands out immediately is the tone. This episode feels warm, almost disarmingly so. It's not soft or harmless, but deeply human. There's laughter that feels earned, and silence that feels intentional. These are the quiet moments that remind you why this world captured our imaginations in the first place. Long before thrones and prophecies took center stage, the show understands something crucial. Fantasy doesn't feel real because of magic. It feels real because of people. The chemistry between our two leads carries almost every scene, and it never feels forced. Their conversations aren't about destiny or legacy. They're about food, discomfort, embarrassment, and just trying to understand a world that often doesn't make sense. And in those small exchanges, you see something rare: trust forming in real time. There's this moment where they share a laugh, not because a joke was delivered, but because the situation just allowed it. It's the kind of laugh that happens when tension dissolves for just a second. It feels lived in, familiar, like something you weren't meant to notice, but did anyway. And that's the real magic of this episode. It takes the ordinary and makes it feel incredibly meaningful. Music plays a huge part in this, but not in the way you might expect. Instead of a swelling orchestra telling you how to feel, the episode leans into raw simplicity. The songs feel like they belong to the space they're sung in. They're a little rough, a little crude, a little playful, and deeply revealing. These aren't performances for us, the audience. They're performances for each other. There's this understanding that stories in this world aren't always written down in books. They're passed hand to hand, voice to voice, song to song. And what gets remembered isn't always what's true, it's what survives being told. That idea lingers just beneath the surface of nearly every scene. One of the most striking things is how the episode balances humor and weight. It never undercuts a serious moment with a cheap joke, but it also never forgets that people joke when things get uncomfortable. Laughter becomes a coping mechanism, a release valve, and sometimes even a shield. There's a line of dialogue that could have been a throwaway, but instead it lands like a thesis statement for the whole episode. Not because it's dramatic, but precisely because it isn't. It acknowledges that not every lesson has a clean moral, that sometimes wisdom isn't about knowing the right answer, but knowing when you don't. That kind of writing takes real confidence. Visually, the episode reinforces its themes without drawing attention to itself. Wide shots linger a little longer than you'd expect. Characters are often framed small against vast, open spaces, not to diminish them, but to remind us how easily people get lost in systems larger than themselves. Tents, fields, roads, none of it feels grand. It all feels temporary. It feels like everything we're seeing could be gone tomorrow. And that feeling of impermanence is so important. Because this episode isn't about conquest or victory. It's about preparation. It's about standing at the edge of something you don't fully understand yet. It's about that uneasy calm before your choices start to have real, lasting consequences. There's a subtle tension that hums quietly through the entire episode. You feel it in glances that linger just a second too long, in words that almost get spoken, and in moments where characters hesitate. They're not hesitating because they're afraid, but because they know that in this world, even hesitation itself can be dangerous. One of the episode's greatest strengths is how it handles morality. There are no grand speeches about honor, no monologues about righteousness. Instead, a character's values are revealed through their actions, through what they're willing to tolerate, what they choose to ignore, and what finally pushes them to act. And when that action comes, even in small ways, it feels completely earned. There's also this undercurrent of unease tied to authority. It's not open rebellion or defiance, just quiet skepticism. Questions are asked carefully. Observations are made under breath. There's a sense that power, even when it smiles at you, is never entirely safe. That tension feels especially relevant in a world where titles and bloodlines loom so large, but simple humanity keeps slipping through the cracks. Now, a lot of people have talked about how funny this episode is, and that's true. But what's more impressive is why it's funny. The humor doesn't punch down or rely on shock. It comes from character. It comes from misunderstanding and the sheer awkwardness of people trying to connect across their different experiences. There's a kind of innocence here that feels fragile, not naive, just unguarded. And the episode knows exactly how precious that is. By the time the credits roll, you don't feel like you've watched something incomplete. You feel like you've been invited into a moment, a pause, a breath taken just before the story tightens its grip. And maybe that's why this episode resonates so strongly. In a franchise that's famous for its brutality and betrayal, a Knight of the Seven Kingdoms dares to say that kindness matters, that small moments matter, and that sometimes the most powerful thing a story can do is remind you what's truly at stake before it's all taken away. This episode doesn't promise us comfort going forward, but it does something just as important. It makes you care. It makes you want to sit a little longer in this world. Listen to one more song, share one more meal, and laugh one more time before the road ahead gets harder. And when the story eventually asks its characters to make a choice, you understand exactly what they're choosing between. That isn't spectacle. That's storytelling. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this deep dive, make sure to like and subscribe for more content like this. Let me know your favorite moment from the episode down in the comments. See you next time.